Imagine for a second that there are actually two realities.
Oh, two realities.
Yeah. So reality number one is the world we see, the one where we touch things, where we pay our taxes.
The fun one.
Right, the fun one. It's the traffic jams, the grocery store lines, the physical body sitting right in a chair listening to this right now. It's the world of atoms and gravity.
And deadlines. Don't forget deadlines.
Exactly, deadlines.
Yeah.
That is reality number one. But then imagine there is a second reality that's fully superimposed over the first one. Or maybe existing just like adjacent to it.
Like a parallel track.
Yeah, a parallel track that is just as empirical, just as factual, and just as populated as our own.
Right.
But it's only accessible if you know how to shift the frequency of your own consciousness.
I mean, it sounds like the premise of a high-concept science fiction novel, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's like we're about to discuss the Matrix or some string theory multiverse concept. But for the vast majority of human history, and we are talking tens of thousands of years here, this wasn't fiction. It wasn't a metaphor. It was basically the standard operating manual for human survival.
And that brings us to the source material we are doing a deep dive into today. Because this material argues that by ignoring this second reality, this non-ordinary reality as they call it, we've essentially been trying to treat human illness with one hand tied behind our backs.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
We look at the physical symptoms, the biology, the chemistry, but we are completely ignoring the spiritual architecture that actually holds the physical body together.
It is a really bold claim. And usually when you hear claims like that, you sort of expect them to come from, I don't know, a mystical guru or some channeled New Age text.
Right, someone selling crystals online.
Exactly. But today is very different. We are unpacking a text called Core Practices in the Shamanic Treatment of Illness. And the authors, Michael Harner, PhD, and Sandra Harner, PhD, they come from a highly specific, rigorous academic background.
Yeah, these aren't people who just decided to open a spiritual wellness shop one day. Michael Harner was a renowned anthropologist.
He did serious fieldwork.
He went deep into the Amazon. He established the foundation for shamanic studies. And he approached this entire field not as a religion, but as a methodology.
A technology, really.
Yes, a technology. And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We want to strip away the pop culture idea of the shaman.
You know, the guy in the buffalo hat at a music festival?
Exactly.
Huh?
Or the self-proclaimed wellness guru on social media. We are looking at core shamanism, a system that claims to explain the why behind illness, whereas Western medicine, for all its absolute miracles, can usually only explain the what.
I really love that distinction, the what versus the why.
It feels crucial to understanding this whole text.
It is crucial. Think about it. If you go to a doctor with a broken leg, they can easily tell you the bone is snapped. They can take an x-ray. They can set it. They can give you painkillers.
Yeah.
That is the what. But a shaman in the system asks a completely different set of questions. They ask, why did you trip in the first place?
Why was your power so low that this accident happened to you today rather than yesterday?
Exactly. Why were you spiritually vulnerable at that specific moment? It is a holistic view that suggests we have, in the West, truncated our own scientific potential by dismissing the spiritual a priori.
Meaning, we basically decided it doesn't exist before we even bothered to look for it.
Precisely.
So we have a really fascinating roadmap for this deep dive. We're going to define what a shaman actually is, technically speaking, because the word gets thrown around constantly.
Far too much.
Then we are going to map out the geography of these invisible worlds, which, as the source describes, have a very specific and consistent layout. We will talk about how people actually get sick in this system.
Which includes some frankly terrifying concepts.
Yeah, things like soul loss and spirit intrusion. And then finally, we will look at the toolkit. How do they fix it? How do you retrieve a lost soul?
And perhaps most importantly for you listening right now, what does all of this mean for us today in a modern, highly interconnected society?
Because the implications for how we treat each other, even just how we think about each other, are massive.
They really are.
Okay, so let's unpack this from the foundation. Let's start with the word itself. Shaman. I feel like I see this word absolutely everywhere now.
Oh, it's ubiquitous.
People call themselves social media shamans or marketing shamans. It has basically become a buzzword for just being an expert in something.
Which is, to put it mildly, wildly inaccurate according to our source material. The word shaman isn't just a vibe or an aesthetic. It actually comes from the Tungusic-speaking people of Siberia. It has a very specific linguistic and cultural root. But what anthropologists like Michael Harner found, and even Mircea Eliade before him, is that while the word itself is strictly Siberian, the practice it describes is a worldwide phenomenon.
When you say worldwide, you don't mean it started in Siberia and slowly spread out to you. You mean it popped up independently all over the globe.
That is the big mystery here. We're talking about a system that anthropologists estimate is at least 30,000 years old.
That is just mind-boggling.
It really is. That predates agriculture. It predates settled civilization. It predates the invention of the wheel. And yet, whether you look at the Sami people in Northern Europe, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, the indigenous tribes of the North American plains, or the deep Amazon rainforest, the core methodology they use is shockingly similar.
That consistency is really the hook for me. If everyone was just making up fairy tales around the campfire, you would expect those tales to be completely different based on their local environment.
Exactly.
But if they're all developing the exact same technology, kind of like how completely isolated cultures independently discovered how to make fire or bows and arrows, it suggests they're interacting with something objective.
That is Harner's exact thesis. He argues deeply that shamanism is not a religion, it is a methodology. It is a set of tools used to interact with a real spiritual world.
And the definition of a shaman in this context is very strict, right?
Extremely strict. A shaman isn't just a wise village elder or a herbalist or a sorcerer.
Okay.
A shaman is specifically a person who purposely enters a trance state. The Harners call this the shamanic state of consciousness, or SSC.
SSC.
They enter this SSC to interact with spirits, specifically for the purpose of healing or helping their community.
So if you aren't going into that specific altered trance to talk to spirits, you aren't actually doing shamanism.
That is the dividing line in the source material. You might be a fantastic healer. You might be a very holy person. But you aren't a shaman.
The trance is the vehicle.
The trance is the vehicle. And this brings us to the whole concept of core shamanism. Michael Harner started this specific work in the late 1960s. He was trained by Amazonian tribes, groups like the Canobo and the Shuar.
He lived with them.
Yes, he lived with them and learned their ways directly. But he realized something very crucial as he started comparing his field notes with other anthropologists working in different parts of the world.
What did he notice?
He saw that while the outward rituals, the specific chants, the costumes, and the local cultural myths changed drastically from tribe to tribe, the underlying technique was completely universal.
So he basically distilled it, like taking the alcohol out of the mash.
That's a really good analogy. He distilled the universal features, the journeying, the altered states, the use of spirit helpers, and he separated those mechanics from the specific cultural traditions.
I can imagine that was pretty controversial in academic circles.
Oh, absolutely. Because cultural context is incredibly important to anthropologists.
Right, you don't want to strip away the cultural identity.
Exactly. But the benefit, as the source strongly outlines, is that it allows Westerners to adopt what they call a culture-free system.
Culture-free.
Yes. It allows a person living in a modern apartment in Berlin or New York or Tokyo to use these ancient techniques without culturally appropriating the specific costumes or dialects of an Amazonian tribe.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't have to pretend to be a Lakota warrior to practice the underlying mechanics of shamanism.
Right. It democratizes the spiritual technology. It basically says this toolkit belongs to the human species as a whole, not just one specific indigenous group.
Okay, but we have to address the giant elephant in the room here. You mentioned interacting with spirits.
Yes. This is definitely the pivot point for most modern readers.
Because usually, when modern, educated people hear the word spirits, we immediately think, okay, metaphors.
Sure.
We think of spirits as Jungian archetypes or just fragmented parts of our own subconscious mind. We psychologize it.
We say, oh, my bare spirit is just my inner strength manifesting in a visual way.
Exactly. But Harner is very firm on this point in the text.
He is unbending on it. That psychological interpretation is incorrect, or at least it is a vastly insufficient way to view what is actually happening.
Because in the shamanic view, these spirits are not metaphors at all.
They are not psychological projections. They are empirical facts.
Whoa! Okay, so when a shaman is in that deep trance state, they aren't just imagining a spirit guide in their mind's eye.
No. They are seeing them, touching them, smelling them, and hearing them. To the shaman in the SSC, a spirit is as real as you are sitting across from me in the studio right now.
That is where the Western mind really hits a brick wall.
It struggles terribly with this. The source argues that Western science, basically ever since the Age of Enlightenment, issued a cultural decree.
A decree that spirits simply don't exist.
Right. It was essentially a bad breakup with the church.
Science took the physical assets, religion got the spiritual ones.
It was a strict division of territory. Science said, we will deal with the measurable physical world. Religion, you deal with the invisible moral world.
But over time, that division morphed. It turned into, well, if we can't measure the invisible doesn't actually exist.
Exactly. And Harner argues passionately that this is a belief system. It is not a scientific fact.
Because science hasn't disproven spirits.
Right. Science has never falsified the existence of spirits. You physically cannot disprove them using current scientific instruments. So, by ignoring them, Western medicine has developed a massive, glaring blind spot.
It's trying to describe the universe while willfully ignoring half the available data.
It is like trying to study the deep ocean, but absolutely refusing to acknowledge the existence of fish just because you can't see them from the surface.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yep.
And the shaman, in this context, is the one who actually puts on the scuba gear.
Yes. They enter the non-ordinary reality, the NOR, to deal with the fish directly. They don't just sit on the boat and speculate about whether the fish exist. They dive in and swim with them.
Okay, so let's put on the scuba gear ourselves.
Yeah.
If we're going to dive into this non-ordinary reality, we need a map. Because reading the source, it became clear that this isn't just some chaotic, random dreamscape.
No, it is highly structured.
The text outlines a very specific cosmology, a real geography of the invisible.
It does. And again, this geography is remarkably consistent across incredibly diverse, isolated cultures, which Harner points out reinforces the idea that it is an objective territory they are all visiting.
So what does the map look like?
It generally divides the universe into three distinct realms: the middle world, the upper world, and the lower world.
Okay, let's start with the middle world. That is where we are right now, right?
Yes and no. We do live in the middle world. But the middle world has two distinct aspects. It has the ordinary reality.
The physical stuff, this table, the microphones, the cars outside.
Exactly. But it also has the non-ordinary reality. So right here in this room, completely superimposed over us, is the spiritual dimension of the middle world.
Was that where the ghosts are? I have to ask.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The key characteristic of the middle world is that it is bound by time. It is the realm of the present moment, the now.
Okay.
And the spirits found roaming around here are often what the source calls disembodied middle world spirits.
Which means they used to have bodies.
Yes. These are beings who have died, but for whatever reason, they haven't left the earthly plane.
And I take it from the source that this is not a good thing.
Usually, no, it's not. The source describes them as often being very confused or suffering, or sometimes completely unaware that they are even dead.
That's incredibly sad, actually.
It is. They lack real spiritual power. And they completely lack the broad compassion of the higher spirits. They are just wandering, essentially stuck in the terrestrial timeline.
And as we'll talk about when we get to the illness section, these wandering spirits are often a major source of trouble.
Oh, absolutely. They are essentially like spiritual pollution accumulating in the local environment.
Okay, so middle world spirits are the confused wanderers.
Right.
That sounds incredibly stressful. What about the other two? The upper and lower worlds.
The upper and lower worlds are totally different. They exist outside of time.
Outside of time, so past, present, future, all at once.
Something like that. It's a non-linear dimension. And these are the realms of the compassionate spirits.
Compassionate spirits. I really like the sound of that. It implies they aren't just neutral observers.
No, they are highly benevolent. These are beings that have fully transcended the messiness of the middle world. They have crossed over and merged with what you might call divine love or universal wisdom.
So who exactly lives up there? Or down there?
In the upper world, a shaman might encounter spiritual teachers, saints from various traditions, highly evolved mystical figures, or ancestors who have completely crossed over into the light.
And a lower world. Because lower usually sounds bad to a Western ear.
That is a very important distinction. In this system, lower absolutely does not mean hell or evil.
Right.
It is often experienced as a deeply primordial, pure, natural realm. Think of incredibly vivid, deep forests, vast jungles, crystal caves.
It sounds beautiful.
It is. This is where a shaman typically encounters power animals and ancient nature spirits.
So here's my question. If these compassionate spirits are chilling out in this timeless realm of perfect divine love, Why do they even care about us?
That's fair.
Why bother interacting with us down here in the middle world with all our traffic jams, noise, and constant suffering?
That is a beautiful question, and the source answers it directly. The explanation is that because many of these spirits were once human themselves or once existed in some physical form, they deeply understand suffering.
They remember what it feels like.
Yes. They look back at the middle world, which is often referred to as the pain reality, and they feel profound pity and compassion. They actively want to help alleviate that suffering.
But there is a catch. There's always a catch in these systems.
There is a big catch. They want to help, but they are not all powerful in the physical middle world.
Why not? If they have divine power, shouldn't they just be able to snap their fingers and fix things?
You can think of them like incredibly powerful radio signals. The signal is immensely strong at the source in the upper or lower world, but it needs a physical receiver to actually be heard and manifest here in the dense middle world.
They need a physical anchor to pull their power across a dimensional divide.
Precisely, and the shaman is that receiver.
The shaman is the bridge between the worlds.
The shaman is the willing physical ally that allows these compassionate spirits to actually intervene in our reality. Without the shaman, the spirits can send general love and good vibes, but they can't easily perform targeted spiritual surgery, so to speak.
Okay, so how does the shaman actually build that bridge? We talked about the shamanic state of consciousness, this trance, but how do they trigger it?
Good question.
We're talking about heavy psychedelics here? Ayahuasca, peyote?
Well, while it is true that specific plant medicines are used in many indigenous Amazonian and Mesoamerican traditions, the core shamanism described by the Harners relies primarily on something else.
Sonic driving.
Yes, sonic driving, specifically drumming.
Just a drum.
A simple, monotonous drum beat, but it's played at a very specific rhythm, usually about 4 to 7 hertz.
4 to 7 beats per second. That is incredibly specific. Why that exact number?
It's not a random cultural choice. It turns out that frequency perfectly correlates with theta EEG waves in the human brain.
Theta waves, that's the brain state right between sleeping and waking, right?
Exactly. It's the hypnagogic state.
Where you get those weird dream fragments just as you're falling asleep?
Yes. It is a state highly associated with deep creativity, vivid visual imagery, and lucid dreaming. So in this context, the drum is quite literally a piece of technology.
It's a sonic tool.
It acts as a carrier wave. It creates an auditory driving mechanism that forcefully shifts the brain's dominant frequency from beta, which is our normal alert working state, down into theta within just a few minutes.
So the shaman sits down, starts drumming at 4 to 7 hertz, their brainwaves physically shift into theta, and suddenly the veil between realities lifts.
And they can consciously travel to the upper or lower worlds to get help. They essentially ride the drum beat.
Ride the drum beat, that's a great image.
In traditional Siberian shamanism, the drum is very often literally called the shaman's horse because you mount it and ride it into the other world.
That makes perfect sense now. They aren't just sitting there hallucinating random shapes. They're actively traveling. They're going to consult with an expert, compassionate spirit to find out why their specific patient is sick.
Correct. Which brings us perfectly to the architecture of illness.
Yes. This is the part of the source material that really grabbed me. Because in Western medicine, we talk about viruses, we talk about bad bacteria, genetics, broken bones.
All physical things.
But in this core shamanic system, the root cause of an illness is always spiritual.
Always. But we need to remember, the source strongly emphasizes that shamanic healing is complementary.
Right. They aren't telling you to throw away your antibiotics.
Not at all. They aren't saying physical bacteria don't exist. What they are saying is that your individual susceptibility to that bacteria has a spiritual root cause.
Why did you get the flu this week, but your partner sitting right next to you didn't?
Exactly. Why did the cancer develop right now in this specific organ rather than 10 years ago?
We are back to the why versus the what.
We are, and the Harners categorize all spiritual illness into 2 very clear main buckets: loss and acquisition.
Keep it simple. Either you lost something or you pick something up.
It is a binary diagnostic system. Either you have lost something vital that should be there, or you have acquired something toxic that shouldn't be there.
Let's start with the first bucket, loss. And specifically, the concept of soul loss.
This is a heavy one.
It really is. The phrase alone just hits hard. It feels very poetic when you first hear it, but in this specific context, it is literal.
It is entirely literal. Soul loss is considered one of the primary causes of severe illness, chronic depression, and even death in shamanic cultures globally.
So how does a soul get lost?
The underlying concept is that the human soul is not just one solid, unbreakable, monolithic block. It is fluid, and it can fragment.
Okay.
When a person suffers a severe trauma, and this can be anything from horrific physical abuse to surviving a car accident or even just a sudden emotional shock, a part of their vital essence literally flees the body.
It just runs away.
It dissociates. It leaves the physical body to escape the unbearable pain of the moment.
Like a circuit breaker tripping to prevent a fire.
That's a brilliant analogy. It is a fundamental spiritual survival mechanism. If the entire soul stayed fully present in the body during a truly horrific event, it might be permanently shattered or destroyed by the sheer intensity of the suffering.
So ejects. Where does it go?
It hides in the non-ordinary reality. It goes to a place where it feels safe, often in the lower world, or sometimes it just hovers nearby, stuck in the middle world.
That makes so much sense, even just looking at it through a modern psychological lens.
Right.
We constantly talk about people checking out during a traumatic event, or you hear people say things like, I just haven't felt like myself since the accident.
Or a part of me died that day.
Yes. We use these phrases as figures of speech. We say, he's just not all there today.
But the shaman listens to that and says, no, you are speaking literally. Literally 20% of your vital essence is missing from your physical vessel.
The source mentions that this has a parallel in Latin American cultures, right?
Yes, the concept of susto. It translates to fright illness. It is incredibly widely recognized in those cultures. If a child gets a terrible scare, the family will immediately perform rituals to call the spirit back because they know susto can lead to chronic sickness.
The symptoms described in the text for soul loss sound basically like an epidemic in modern society.
They really do. Feeling dispirited, chronic treatment-resistant depression, a pervasive feeling of being empty or fragmented, and notably a blocked memory of the trauma itself.
Because the part of you that experienced the trauma isn't in your body anymore.
Exactly. And the implication for modern medicine here is profound.
How so?
Well, if a crucial part of you is literally missing, you cannot be fully healed by purely physical or even psychological means.
Because you're treating an empty room.
Right. You can treat the physical symptoms, you can spend years in talk therapy, you can take a cocktail of antidepressants, but if the core self that actually needs to be healed isn't even in the building, the therapy won't stick.
You are trying to put new furniture into a room that has no floor.
Exactly. It just falls through.
That is such a heavy, powerful concept. Okay, so that is soul loss. But the source mentions another kind of loss in this first bucket. Guardian spirit loss.
Yes.
This sounds a bit like losing your spiritual bodyguard.
That is exactly what it is. In this cosmology, the belief is that absolutely everyone is born with or acquires a guardian spirit.
Usually a power animal.
Very often a power animal. And this spirit's job is to provide a comprehensive shield of spiritual immunity. It's essentially your spiritual immune system.
So having a power animal isn't just a fun personality quiz to see if you are a wolf or a bear.
No, it is not a metaphor for your personality. It is an active protective force. It encapsulates your energetic body in a force field.
So what happens if you lose it?
In the shamanic view, to be fully power-filled is to be completely healthy. If you are full of your guardian's power, negative energy, sickness, even physical accidents, they just bounce off you like rain off a good raincoat.
You're untouched.
Essentially, yes. But if you lose that guardian, maybe through ignoring it, through neglecting your spiritual life, or just through the grinding wear and tear of a difficult life, you become deeply vulnerable.
Your shields drop.
Your shields drop completely. You become a magnet for physical illness, for chronic bad luck, and most dangerously, for the entire second category of spiritual illness.
Which brings us to the second bucket, acquisition. Something is present in your body that shouldn't be there.
Right.
The main one listed here is spirit intrusions. I have to be honest, this sounds incredibly parasitic.
It is highly parasitic. The source describes these intrusions as localized clumps of negative energy or sometimes actual minor entities that get stuck inside the physical body.
And what do they do?
They cause localized pain and sickness. For example, if you have a chronic stabbing pain in your shoulder or your gut, and no doctor can find a physical cause, a shaman might look at it in the non-ordinary reality and see a spiritual termite.
A termite.
Or a slug, or a dark, pulsing blotch of energy festering right there in the tissue.
Okay, that gave me chills. Where do these things even come from?
This is where the text gets sociologically fascinating, and it deeply ties into our whole interconnectedness theme for this deep dive.
Let's get into it.
Historically, in tribal settings, they might talk about rival sorcerers intentionally sending invisible darts to harm someone.
A conscious curse.
Right. But in our modern, everyday context, the source strongly suggests that these intrusions are very often sent unconsciously.
Unconsciously.
Yes, by angry, violently jealous, or extremely hostile people we interact with every day.
So if I am sitting at my desk, just completely seething with rage at my coworker because they stole my credit on a project,
Yes.
I'm not just having a private internal emotional experience. I might literally be launching a spiritual projectile at them.
That is the direct implication of this system. Thoughts are actual, tangible things in the non-ordinary reality.
Wow.
If you have enough intense emotional charge behind a negative thought, and the target happens to have guardian spirit loss, meaning their shields are down.
That thought form can physically lodge in their body and cause an illness.
Yes, it becomes a localized spiritual infection.
That honestly brings a terrifying whole new meaning to the phrase toxic work environment.
It really does. It suggests that human beings are fundamentally porous. We are not these hermetically sealed off individual units walking around. We are constantly exchanging energy with everyone around us.
But there is a huge warning here in the text about doing this.
A massive warning. The source speaks extensively of karmic reciprocity,
What goes around comes around.
but much faster and harder. It is a spiritual boomerang. The rule in the shamanic world is that if you send out negative energy, even entirely unconsciously, the universe bounces it back to the sender.
And usually multiplied, right?
Often multiplied. So sitting there hating your coworker is fundamentally self-destructive. Hate is bad for the hater, not just on a moral level, but on a literal medical level.
You are basically poisoning your own well.
Exactly. It's a self-inflicted spiritual wound.
Okay, so that is intrusion. But the final type of illness in the acquisition bucket is arguably the most dramatic: involuntary possession.
We have to tread very carefully here because Hollywood has completely ruined this specific concept for the general public.
Yeah, we immediately think of spinning heads, levitating beds, and green vomit.
Exactly, The Exorcist.
Yeah.
But the traditional shamanic view of possession is actually much more mundane and honestly far more tragic.
So it's not usually a demon from hell.
Usually, no. Remember those middle world spirits we talked about earlier?
The confused, wandering dead people stuck in our timeline.
Right. Sometimes a highly confused spirit, maybe someone who died suddenly in a car crash or died of a severe drug overdose.
Yeah.
They stumble into the aura of living person who is spiritually vulnerable, usually someone suffering from severe soul loss.
They see an empty room with the door wide open.
That is exactly how it is described. And they don't even necessarily mean harm. They are just lost, cold, and looking for a body to inhabit. They desperately want to feel physical sensations and feel alive again.
So they just move in, like a spiritual squatter.
Yes, a
Yeah.
squatter. And the really scary part is that the living person's symptoms will begin to perfectly reflect the squatter's personality.
Oh, wow.
If the possessing spirit was a severe alcoholic in life, the living host will suddenly, out of nowhere, develop an uncontrollable craving for alcohol.
Because the spirit is trying to drink through them.
Precisely. If the spirit was a deeply angry, violent person, the host suddenly becomes prone to violent outbursts. You see these incredibly drastic behavior changes, almost mimicking a sudden dual personality.
And the source goes out of its way to distinguish this from channeling, doesn't it?
Very importantly, yes. Channeling or mediumship is voluntary possession.
You invite them in.
Right. It is a disciplined, temporary partnership with a higher compassionate spirit for the purpose of receiving wisdom. Involuntary possession, on the other hand, is considered a severe illness. It is a fundamental violation of personal sovereignty.
Okay, so we have the full diagnostic manual now. We have the patient. They are sitting in front of the shaman. They're either missing a vital soul part, missing their guardian shield, infested with spiritual termites, or being puppeted by a confused ghost.
Or a rough day at the office.
Seriously. So now we need the toolkit. We need the shamanic ER.
The toolkit is surprisingly direct and highly surgical.
Because the shaman doesn't prescribe physical pills or assign homework.
No. They actively go into the trance state, shift into the SSC, and perform literal operations in the non-ordinary reality.
Let's talk about the flagship procedure first. Soul retrieval.
It is the most well-known practice for a reason. If the diagnostic journey reveals soul loss, the shaman has to go get it back.
How do they actually find a fragmented piece of a soul out there in the infinite spirit world?
They don't do it alone. They travel into the spirit world and immediately consult their own spirit helpers. They ask for a tracker.
So they have spiritual bloodhounds.
Basically, yes. They might search the dense jungles of the lower world, or the ethereal planes of the upper world, they are usually looking for a specific manifestation. Often, it appears as the happy child.
The essence of the patient right before the severe trauma occurred.
Exactly. But finding it is only half the battle. When they find the soul fragment, they very often have to convince it to actually come back.
Because it ran away for a very good reason. It was terrified.
Right. The soul fragment is usually still frozen in the moment of trauma. It thinks the abuse or the accident is still happening, so the shaman has to become a negotiator.
What do they say?
They say things like, look, the war is over. You are an adult now. You live in a safe house. We desperately need your light and your energy. It is safe to come home now.
That is so incredibly moving.
It really is.
Yeah.
And once convinced, the shaman literally catches the soul fragment, often cupping it protectively in their physical hands in our reality.
While still in the trance.
Yes. They physically bring their hands back and they blow the soul fragment forcefully back into the patient's physical body.
Where do they blow it?
Usually directly into the heart center and into the crown of the head.
And what happens to the patient? Is it an instantaneous change?
The clinical anecdotes in the source describe it as an immediate return of vitality. Practitioners say the person literally looks different within minutes. Their skin tone changes, their eyes become much brighter. They report feeling deeply filled up for the first time in years.
But there is a really crucial nuance here regarding modern psychotherapy that the source mentions.
Yes, and this is vital for modern integration. Soul retrieval does not magically erase the memory of the abuse or the car crash.
It's not a memory wipe.
No. What it does is bring back the fully resourced person who is actually capable of processing that memory. Harner notes that very often modern talk therapy totally stalls out because the patient literally isn't all there.
You can't process trauma if the part of you that holds the trauma is hiding in another dimension.
Precisely. Once the soul fragment is returned, suddenly the psychological therapy starts working beautifully. The patient finally has the core strength to face the demons and do the integration work.
That is such a powerful example of collaboration between ancient spiritual technology and modern psychology.
It's the ultimate complementary medicine.
Okay, what about the intrusions? The spiritual termites. How do they get those out of the patient's shoulder or gut?
That technique is aptly called extraction, and it is exactly what it sounds like.
Pulling them out.
Yes. The shaman enters the trance, uses a diagnostic technique often called seeing, which is essentially spiritual X-ray vision, to locate the intrusion in the physical body.
And it looks like a bug or a dark mass.
Usually, yes. Then they remove it.
Do they use their hands for this too?
They use their spiritual hands, yes. Or, very traditionally, they merge deeply with their power animal and physically suck the intrusion out of the patient's body without ever breaking the skin.
Literally suck it out with their mouth.
Yes. It's a very common historical technique, though admittedly less used in the modern West because of, hygiene optics.
Yeah, that might not go over well in a modern wellness clinic.
Right. But the underlying physics of it is that the intrusion is pure energy. The shaman uses their own body as a vacuum to pull it out, but they have to be incredibly careful not to accidentally swallow it and let it enter their own system.
Oh, man. So what do they do with it once it's in their mouth or hands?
They immediately trap it, neutralize it, and expel it. Often they forcefully spit it into a bowl of water or into a fire, which are neutralizing elements, or they send it back out into deep nature where the earth can safely compost and transform that dense energy.
It really is like handling radioactive hazmat material.
Very much so. It is highly dangerous work if you aren't properly trained and shielded by your own spirits. You definitely do not want to take on a patient's spiritual infection.
All right, then we have depossession. This is the treatment for those squatter spirits we talked about. And reading the source, there was a very, very strict rule about this procedure, especially regarding patients with severe addiction.
Yes, this is a fascinating boundary. The source states emphatically that for depossession to actually work, the patient absolutely must want to be healed.
It can't be forced on them.
No. And if the possession involves heavy substance abuse or addiction, the patient must be physically sober for at least 48 to 72 hours prior to the ceremony.
Why is that rule so rigid?
2 reasons. First, if the patient is intoxicated, the possessing spirit is fully fed and has a much, much stronger grip on the nervous system.
That makes sense.
But more importantly, it is fundamentally about free will. Core shamanism is not a magic trick that a wizard performs on you against your will. It is a cooperative partnership. The patient has to actively choose the light over the addiction.
And the goal of the depossession isn't to violently destroy or kill the possessing spirit, right?
Yeah.
Because, well, it's already dead.
Correct. And this is where the profound beauty of the system really shines. The goal is entirely based on compassion.
Compassion for the squatter.
Yes. The shaman doesn't just furiously cast the spirit out into the dark abyss to go bother someone else. The shaman acts as a psychopomp.
A conductor of souls.
Exactly. They interact with the confused spirit. They gently help it realize that it is actually dead because often it doesn't know.
Oh, wow.
And then the shaman actually guides that lost spirit up to the upper world or down to the lower world, wherever it properly belongs. They reunite the ghost with its own deceased loved ones who are waiting for it.
So it is essentially a dual healing. A healing for the living patient and the dead ghost simultaneously.
Exactly. It completely clears the board. It frees the living patient from the toxic influence, and it frees the dead spirit from its endless terrestrial confusion.
That is so deeply humane. But finally, after you have completely cleaned house, you retrieved the lost soul, you extracted the energetic termites, you compassionately evicted the ghost. You can't just leave the patient's house empty, can you?
No, absolutely not. Because nature, especially spiritual nature, completely abhors a vacuum.
If you leave a person energetically clean but totally empty,
They're just going to walk outside and immediately get filled up with negative junk again. The next angry person on the subway is going to throw an intrusion right into that empty space.
so what is the final step in the shamanic ER?
The final step is almost always guardian spirit retrieval.
Getting the bodyguard back online.
Yes. The shaman journeys one last time to find a specific power animal or a guardian spirit who is willing to partner with the patient. They bring that spirit back and blow that power directly into the patient's body.
To fill the void.
Exactly. It completely fills the void. It gives the patient an immediate surge of confidence, physical energy, and most importantly, it restores their immune shield. It seals the energetic work so the healing actually lasts.
It really is a totally comprehensive medical system. You
Yeah.
have diagnostic imaging, you have surgery, you have rehabilitation, and you have preventative care.
It is entirely complete in its internal logic. And this brings us to the big so what of the deep dive.
Right. Why does any of this ancient cosmology matter to a modern listener who has absolutely no intention of buying a drum and moving out to a yurt in the woods?
The source gives a truly compelling, real-world example of this system functioning within modern capitalism, the famous Wisconsin HMO story.
This was the anecdote that totally stopped me in my tracks while reading.
It is incredible. The source details a health maintenance organization in Wisconsin that decided to try something entirely radical for an insurance company. They agreed to reimburse shamanic healing work.
They actually paid for soul retrievals.
Yes. They formally included shamanic practitioners in a specific wellness plan, right alongside conventional things like massage therapy and chiropractic care.
And what was the actual result of mixing spirits with corporate health insurance?
The primary practitioner involved reported that medical insurance payouts for that specific group of patients dropped by 50%.
50%. That is a massive reduction in medical need.
A 50% drop. And their overall health premiums didn't rise at all for 5 consecutive years.
Okay, that is the exact language the modern Western world understands natively. Money.
It absolutely is. But it points to a much deeper, profound truth. If you successfully treat the underlying spiritual root of an illness, the physical manifestations often resolve themselves, or at least become drastically easier for conventional medicine to manage.
You stop the endless revolving door of just treating symptoms.
Exactly. The source argues passionately for true complementary medicine.
The partnership between the surgeon and the shaman.
Yes. If you get into a severe car wreck, please immediately go to the emergency room. Let the highly trained trauma surgeon fix your ruptured spleen and set your bones. That is their mastery of ordinary reality.
Right, don't just bang a drum over a bleeding artery.
Exactly. But perhaps a week later, also go see the shaman to systematically retrieve the terrified part of your soul that was left behind on the highway pavement. Fix the bone and fix the spirit.
It seems like, based on the text, we're slowly moving toward what they call a global village model of health.
That is definitely the source's ultimate hope. We are currently seeing a massive global revival of indigenous shamanism right alongside the rise of this accessible core shamanism.
Because the brutal colonial era, which actively tried to stamp all of this out under penalty of death, is finally ending.
Right. We're collectively realizing that a strictly ethnocentric medical view, the idea that only Western material science is real and everything else is primitive superstition, is actually incredibly limiting to our own potential.
But there is a massive caveat in the text regarding training. The source is very, very clear on this. You cannot just take a weekend workshop at a retreat center and instantly hang up a shingle as a master shaman.
This is a crucial ethical point. There is no central certification board for shamans.
No shamanic diploma you can frame on the wall.
You can certainly get a certificate that says you attended a course, but you cannot be certified as a healer by a human institution. Because the spirits are the ones doing the actual healing. The shaman is just the hollow bone, the conduit. If the compassionate spirits decide to leave you because you are acting unethically or arrogantly,
You're instantly powerless.
you are completely powerless. A piece of paper on your wall doesn't matter to a spirit. The only true validation of a shaman is, does the desperately sick patient actually get better?
It is a purely results-based business.
It has to be. Lives are literally on the line. And to do this work requires immense personal discipline, rock-solid emotional stability, and an ocean of compassion.
The source famously calls the shaman a technician of the sacred.
I absolutely love that term.
Me too. It grounds the whole practice. It removes the ego. It's not about being a worshipped guru on a pedestal. It is literally about putting on your spiritual hard hat and fixing the energetic wiring.
Exactly. It is fundamentally a service role to the community.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Harner's work, let's really synthesize what we've learned. We are looking at an ancient, universal worldview that emphatically states we live in a multidimensional universe.
A fully populated universe.
Right, and that willfully ignoring the spiritual dimension of illness doesn't magically make that dimension go away. It just leaves us completely unequipped, with fewer tools to treat immense human suffering.
And beyond the clinical healing, it offers us a desperately needed vocabulary.
A way to explain how we feel.
Yes. Even if you are a hardened skeptic and you don't believe in literal spirits, the conceptual frameworks of soul loss and spirit intrusion offer such a powerful, resonant way to understand modern malaise.
Because we live in a completely high-speed, deeply traumatic, endlessly fragmented world.
We all feel dispirited sometimes. We all feel physically invaded by the sheer anger and noise of the 24-hour news cycle and social media.
And core shamanism steps in and says, this feeling you have isn't just a metaphor, it is a literal energetic injury. And more importantly, it can actually be healed.
It completely shifts the paradigm. It suggests that we are utterly porous beings. We are not these sealed-off, rugged individuals we pretend to be. We are constantly breathing in and breathing out energy with everyone and everything around us all the time.
Which naturally leads us to a really provocative thought to end on.
Hit me with it.
If the source material is genuinely correct, if our privately held angry thoughts, our intense jealousies, and our silent hostilities can actually manifest as physical, spiritual intrusions that sicken other people.
If we can literally make our neighbors sick just with our unchecked rage.
Right. What does that mean for our basic human responsibility?
That is the ultimate question. We totally obsess over physical hygiene, right? We obsess over hand sanitizer, masks, and public sanitation to stop physical viruses.
But what about our spiritual hygiene?
Exactly. In a completely interconnected, energetic world, are our internal, private, angry thoughts actually massive public health hazards?
It's a staggering thought. If we genuinely believed that our anger was a physical pollutant, how differently would we treat the people we interact with every single day?
It changes everything.
It is definitely a thought that will stick with me in heavy traffic tomorrow. If I sit in my car and just scream at the guy who aggressively cuts me off, am I literally throwing a spiritual brick through his window?
According to tens of thousands of years of human wisdom, you very well might be. And remember the rule of karmic reciprocity. That brick might just bounce off his guardian spirit and come right back through your own windshield.
A terrifying, yet incredibly beautiful reason to just be kind to each other. Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into the non-ordinary reality.
It was my absolute pleasure.
And to you, the listener, keep your shields up out there. Maybe take a quiet moment today to check in on your own soul. Make sure it is all still there. Until next time.